This is a republic, if you can keep it, with Mark Brewer and Jeff Timmer.
I'm Jeff Timmer. Welcome to the JD's Very Bad Week episode of A Republic, if you can keep it. The vice president and wannabe successor to the MAGA cult of Donald Trump, he went 0 for 2 on his European trip. Viktor Orbán, the dictator of Hungary, campaigning with Vance at his side, got dumped in his role as president, despite ringing endorsements from Donald Trump and Trump's best friend forever, Vladimir Putin. Then Vance led negotiations with Iran over ending Trump's Middle East war and struck out there too, calling it quits after all of just one day of talks.
Between rounds of golf, UFC fights, planning another monument to himself, this time a massive arch, and Melania's bizarre I didn't know Epstein event, Donald Trump got the news that inflation, which he promised to end, was instead going up, thanks to that Middle East war and his tariffs.
Facing multiple and very credible allegations of sexual improprieties and even assault, Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California, has not only pulled out of the California gubernatorial race, but he's also resigned from Congress while he continues to deny the accusations against him. There was bipartisan condemnation of Swalwell's behavior, but when asked if the same standard should be applied to the pussy-grabbing president, Republicans suddenly had a problem answering. Also resigning in disgrace, Texas Republican Tony Gonzalez, like Swalwell, was facing charges of sexual misconduct against him. Mike Johnson, the MAGA speaker, wanted to keep Gonzalez there through the year to pad his numbers, even though Gonzalez had announced he wouldn't seek re-election. But he ended up resigning as the pressure on Swalwell increased. It increased on the Republicans and Gonzalez instead. Republicans are very worried that a special election to replace Gonzalez in Texas could flip to the Democrats, in part due to the new GOP gerrymander of the Texas congressional districts.
Home in the United States, despite dumping Pam Bondi as Attorney General, Trump's effort to politicize the Justice Department continues unabated. 2 federal civil rights prosecutors in Detroit, who secured convictions against a group of Christian protesters accused of blocking access to abortion clinics, were fired Monday as part of a Trump administration retaliation against what it says were politically motivated cases brought under former President Biden.
And Donald Trump is bizarrely redirecting his demented rage at Pope Leo, who had the temerity to note that Jesus wasn't a fan of war or genocide. All that's been missing so far is Trump calling the Pope low IQ, and there's that AI image depicting the Jesus of Palm Beach that was quickly deleted from Trump's social account. And then Vice President J.D. Vance had the audacity to say that Pope Leo should understand his Catholic theology.
Yeah, taking lectures from J.D. Vance on religion. That's a new one. Back here in Michigan again, a new independent poll of likely Democratic primary voters shows that State Senator Mallory McMorrow, who outperformed her colleagues this week in fundraising, has now moved into a tie with former Detroit Health Director Abdul El-Sayed in that primary. McMorrow and El-Sayed are at 24%, according to this poll, while Congresswoman Haley Stevens trails at 13%, but with fully 1/3 of the Democratic voters undecided.
State Democrats are focusing on growing inflation brought about by Donald Trump's Mideast war and his obsession with tariffs. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell led a news conference addressing the most fundamental kitchen table issues, the cost of living, noting that tax cuts in the Republicans' big, beautiful bill are more than offset by the cost of groceries, gasoline, electricity, and healthcare, which have all gone up.
And you know who this hits the hardest? The poorest households, because they spend higher proportion of their income on fuel. And by the way, that doesn't include diesel fuel, which is well over $5 a gallon. And that's what powers our commercial transportation system. So guess what? All those things are being trucked to stores. They're going to increase the cost of goods that people are buying. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, grocery prices in Michigan are up by a whopping 30% since 2020.
It's a mantra we'll hear a lot between now and November.
And not to be outdone in the race to the bottom in the Republican gubernatorial primary, John James has joined with all the other Republican candidates for governor by making a campaign promise they cannot keep, repealing the state income tax. The repeal would basically eliminate the entire general fund budget here in Michigan. And because Michigan is a flat rate tax state, the biggest winners with this repeal would be, no surprise, the state's wealthiest taxpayers.
Attorney General Dana Nessel has blasted one of the many offsets that's raising your cost of living: utility rates running amok. She joined with other Democratic and community leaders to deride the Public Service Commission here in Michigan for rolling over, her words, on behalf of the state's two major utilities.
The MPSC could easily reduce the nearly 10% return on equity gifted to DTE and Consumers Energy every year on your dime. Multiple administrative law judges who conduct these hearings before it reaches the MPSC have agreed with our assessment and forwarded our recommendations of that nature to the Commission. But the Commission has ignored the administrative law judges' recommendations every single solitary time. We keep pouring money into this system that isn't delivering on its promise to Michigan ratepayers.
State Democrats will be holding their endorsement convention this weekend, where, for all practical purposes, they will be selecting the party's candidates for statewide office other than governor, lieutenant governor, and U.S. Senate. There will be hotly contested battles for both Secretary of State and Attorney General to replace term-limited Jocelyn Benson and Dana Nessel.
One of the less visible races for most voters has suddenly become a little more urgent and high profile and controversial is the race for the University of Michigan's Board of Regents. The university's president-elect, the new incoming president, shocked everyone with the announcement he's been diagnosed with a brain tumor and will not be the new president after all. Ironically, he received the diagnosis from doctors at one of the world's best medical centers, the University of Michigan's outstanding medical team at the Rogel Cancer Center. One of the board members seeking renomination this weekend is your close friend and law partner, Jordan Acker. What have you learned about this tragic situation in Ann Arbor and your thoughts on this race ahead of the endorsement convention this weekend?
Yeah, people have been very understanding and respectful of the incoming president's medical condition. It is very sad. I think he would have been a great president at the University of Michigan. He's going to remain associated with the university. He's a law professor and will remain as an advisor. But now the search will resume, I guess, in one way, or start over, as it were, for a university president, one of the best university president jobs, not only in the United States, but I think in the entire world. And frankly, that's all the more reason why I hope the delegates this weekend will retain my friend Jordan Acker. Jordan's done a great job in his 7+ years on the board, has gone through presidential searches. They've had some challenging times at University of Michigan in a variety of ways, and I think he's handled all those with aplomb, and he brings now a lot of experience, which I think the university needs. But he does face a contest this weekend. He's been working very hard. He was on the west coast of Michigan just last night, campaigning over in Kalamazoo and Allegan County. He's been working hard on endorsements, and he's doing everything that, as you know, Jeff, from your experience with your own conventions, that these convention candidates need to do to talk to the delegates, the grassroots activists who are going to be casting these votes this weekend.
Yeah, we certainly have seen some ugly campaigning in this particular race. And so, yeah, it's great to see Jordan focused on his record, his vision for the university, leadership he and others have shown through the turmoil that has happened at the university over the last decade, going back to the sports scandal with the Dr. Anderson, Mark Schlussel resigning after inappropriate relationship, one of the presidents, recent presidents, winning national title in football, losing Jim Harbaugh, the Sharon Moore. We talked about all the craziness at the University of Michigan and in sports in general, collegiate sports, with Jordan when he was a guest on this podcast over the winter. They've had a lot to celebrate. They've had a lot of unfortunate circumstances, and having some steady leadership there with the regents, folks like Jordan and Denise Illich and Mark Bernstein and Paul Brown, who's also seeking a re-election this weekend, is it's what these universities need. And even though most of our listeners are probably insider political junkies with a knowledge of Michigan, the fact that these university board positions are elected statewide by voters who know virtually nothing whatsoever about any of these candidates, because there just isn't money for these candidates to break through and spend the tens of millions of dollars like a gubernatorial or a U.S. Senate race. It's just a unique quirk of Michigan. I'm not even aware of another state that does this. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's there aren't very many, or Michigan might be the only one. And often these races do tend to take on some of the social issues that are hot to party activists, but not necessarily at all to general election voters, or even primary voters for that matter. This is the insiders of the insiders are the delegates. Even though a Republican convention, the delegates are no more than 2,000. What I hear is that they're expecting like 10 to 15,000 delegates, voting delegates at the Democratic convention this weekend.
That's right, Jim. I originated this endorsement convention concept when I was party chair. And also, when I was party chair, we opened up the party so that party members could vote at these conventions, not just precinct delegates selected locally. And so, last I heard, there were upwards of 20,000 eligible Michigan Democratic Party members this weekend, and we could see, like you indicated, 10 to 15,000 people there. I think that's great for the process. It's great for the energy of the party. It's just good in so many different ways. The new chair has done a lot to make sure that people have the right to vote. You can now pre-register on Saturday, and he's encouraging people to do that. And they've got registration also set up, obviously, on Sunday for the convention. There's a variety of ways to vote. The rules have been published and widely people know. So I think it's going to be a very democratic with a small D process. And those delegates are going to have a lot to do, not only in this race. There's a contest for Michigan State board as well. Also for the Attorney General and Secretary of State, we have contests. Ellie Savitt, the Washtenaw County prosecutor, is a candidate for endorsement as the Attorney General candidate. And Karen McDonald, the Oakland County prosecutor, is also seeking that endorsement. So there's a two-person race there. And Secretary of State, we have Susanna Shkreli, who's held a variety of positions. She's been a prosecutor. She worked in the Whitmer administration, seeking Secretary of State support. Barb Byram, who is the current Ingham County clerk and was a former state legislator, and Lieutenant Governor Garvin Gilchrist. Those three are seeking the Secretary of State endorsement. This is not going to be one of those sleepy convention where you just rubber stamp things. These delegates are going to have to make some important choices as they look at all these well-qualified candidates.
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting weekend. The Republicans have already had their endorsement convention, with the Democrats having theirs on Sunday, and then this upcoming Tuesday, April 1st, being the Michigan candidate filing deadline. Next week, our episode will be able to go in and kind of analyze the the playing field? Do all the Republicans running for governor turn in enough signatures? Are there challenges underway? We might not know by next week if there are going to be challenges to petition signatures. Are there challenges that are going to be lodged to any of the Democratic candidates for governor? We'll know that. And then we'll know if there's any surprises in races for the U.S. House and the state Senate and the state House, and start to look at the battle for control of the legislature in Lansing, which with this national headwinds or tailwinds, if you're the Democrats, I say national headwinds against Trump and the Republicans, what's looking to shape up is a very promising year for Democratic candidates in Michigan and across the country. Who wins these races are going to have a leg up who at this convention. Whoever is nominated for Secretary of State or Attorney General should be the favorite heading into the fall. When we see the field of candidates for the legislative seats in particular, I'm interested to see. There's always surprises. My nearly now 40 years of watching in minute detail the battles for the control of the Michigan legislature. There's always filing day surprises. We had an announcement just yesterday or the day before. State Representative Reggie Miller from kind of downriver Ypsilanti, Monroe, Wayne County district announced she's not seeking re-election. The Democrats have a good candidate and to replace her, but those are the kinds of kind of 10th hour surprises that filing deadline always brings. So looking forward to making some popcorn and watching things on Tuesday afternoon after 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. whenever it closes and whenever the electronic filings are uploaded onto the Secretary of State's website. I think Sal Rocca is passed away a few years ago, so we won't probably see any of those machinations down in Macomb County that filing for 3 or 4 different offices, Sal, his wife, his kid, and everybody, then withdrawing from certain races and playing kind of like a 3-card Monte or, the shell game with with who's going to run for what race. But we might start to see that in some other areas or with other surnames. So we'll be watching.
More on a republic if you can keep it after these messages.
When most of us think about polling, the focus is on those campaign polls telling us which candidates are winning. But the most important polls are for businesses, local governments, and nonprofits assessing the needs and wants of their customers or constituencies.
Those are polls that guide policies and lead to institutional success. Those polls have to get it right, which makes the choice of a public opinion research firm critical. Epic MRA has been trusted for more than 4 decades to get it right. Our clients have included school boards, statewide nonprofits, corporations, as well as the candidates and news media who rely on us during political campaigns. Whether it's just a couple of questions or a full in-depth survey, we are here and ready to help.
You can reach us at epicmra.com.
Are you looking to stay ahead of the curve on Michigan's public policy landscape? Look no further than Michigan Information and Research Service Incorporated, or MERS. MERS is your go-to source for comprehensive, nonpartisan news and analysis on Michigan's government and public policy. But that's not all. A MERS subscription also gives you access to our powerful legislative monitoring and tracking tools. Stay on top of every bill, amendment, and vote with real-time updates, detailed reports, interactive committee transcripts, legislative analysis tools, and more. Whether you're a policymaker, lobbyist, or just a concerned citizen, MERS keeps you informed with daily updates, exclusive interviews, and detailed reports. Subscribe today and gain access to our extensive archives. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay ahead with MERS. Visit MERS.news to learn more and subscribe. That's MIRS.news. Don't miss out on the insights that matter most.
Yeah, no, it's been an eventful week. One of my clients and one of our guests one time, Jeremy Moss, came in and told me he had filed his petitions, and the Oakland County Clerk said he's got enough, so he's very happy. Bridget Brink, one of our guests, previously filed her petitions today. So, yeah, people are getting their petitions in. I think all the Democratic Senatorial candidates filed this week. Jocelyn Benson on the gubernatorial side filed yesterday. So, yeah, this is the time when things start to take shape in terms of what the entire ballot's going to look like between these endorsement conventions and the filing deadline on Tuesday.
We did see in the federal races some fundraising hauls for the first quarter of the year. The one that really stood out to me, the Democratic nomination race for the U.S. Senate, the candidates continue to raise shit tons of money. I mean, they're raising a lot of money. Mallory McMorrow, Haley Stevens, and Abdul El-Sayed. McMorrow has been increasing her haul each quarter and has taken the fundraising lead, not only the gross receipts for the quarter, but most cash on hand. She's just behind Mike Rogers. For all relative purposes, unopposed nominee on the Republican side. He does have some token opposition. Whether or not they even make the ballot, we'll find out next week. Rogers has been stockpiling his money. He doesn't have a primary challenge, and he's just ahead of McMorrow and Stevens and El-Sayed when it comes to cash on hand. But what really jumped out to me was the fact that Sean McCann, the state senator from Kalamazoo, who's been a guest on here, significantly outraised Bill Huizenga, the Weasley, waffly, longtime congressman who wasn't even sure if he was going to run. I think that, this is the year where Bill Huizenga has met his match with the national climate and the quality of candidate that Sean McCann is. I knew he would be. And now with his fundraising has demonstrated, hard data that he's one of the top national recruits and prospects to flip a Republican seat for the Democrats. National prognosticators really ought to keep their eye on Michigan for what's really mostly the old Fred Upton district that was trending toward Democrats over the last 20 years. And now I think this is the year, like Hillary Skolton in a neighboring district where she flipped a long-time Republican-held district that had been trending away. It just takes the right candidate at the right time, and I really think this is the time where Bill Huizenga is going to cough up a seat that's been in Republican hands really probably forever. I mean, I know Kalamazoo at one point was represented by Howard Wolpe, but you have to go way back decades. In most of this district, in 90% of 85% at least of the population has been represented by Republicans since the Republican Party was invented.
Yeah, no, good summary, Jeff. Let me just echo and reinforce a couple of those points. Mallory McMorrow, I think, has been doing it right, frankly, with her campaign. She's the kind of candidate that I like to support. I do support. And she's really running a grassroots effort. All 30,000 of her signatures were gathered by volunteers. She had a very well-organized, well-trained set of volunteers. But that volunteer infrastructure, that grassroots approach also reflected in her fundraising. She's doing gangbusters, online fundraising. Well, she works very hard in terms of event fundraising and calling people like we know you have to do. But that volunteer culture, that grassroots culture permeates her campaign. And it shows up in fundraising. And so now she's built an army of people who've circulated petitions for her, and she'll put them to work in the primary and then in the general election as well. On the 4th district, I can tell you there's a lot of Democratic energy there. Sean McCann, former city commissioner in Kalamazoo, state rep, state senator, really well respected and loved by certainly the people in that area. I think he's the strongest possible candidate the Democrats could have recruited to run there. And you're right, those are very impressive. Surprised me. I mean, Sean's a great candidate and a great fundraiser, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that he outraised that well-established, strong incumbent, Huizenga. So I'm sure that caught some attention in D.C., more than some attention by the Republicans and the Democrats to see Sean do that. He also filed his petitions this week through a volunteer effort. You don't need as many when you're running for Congress. But again, a grassroots-focused candidate, and that pays off in these kind of races.
One thing we talked about in the opening section, Mark, was the really strange and unhinged attack by Donald Trump on the Catholic Church and the Pope, and J.D. Vance telling the Pope to, keep his nose out of world affairs, and he doesn't know the theology. The zeal of the new convert. The American Idol has been on the air like 3 times as long as J.D. Vance has been a Catholic, and he has the temerity to lecture the Pope on what being Catholic means and what Catholic doctrine should be. It's really bizarre. And the reason I think this could really make a difference, at least in some areas, is you look at Southeast Michigan, especially, and up that I-75 corridor where there's going to be a lot of competitive races. The special election for the state Senate coming up in a couple of weeks, open John James seat, many races for the competitive toss-up races for the legislature, and the statewide races. If Trump and the Republicans, and therefore with their fealty and cowardice and their complete unwillingness to call out wrong when Donald Trump does it, the candidates, whether it's John James or Perry Johnson or Mike Cox or Mike Rogers, are going to be saddled with Donald Trump's, this giant albatross. Those are heavily Catholic areas, or I should say more Catholic than the statewide average, more Catholic than the national average in those areas. Am I reading that right? Do you think it's not going to mean like all Catholics are now going to turn away from splitting their votes? They're ticket splitters or equally divided between Republicans and Democrats. But is this the kind of thing that can push the needle enough to make a difference?
I think it can, Jeff. I mean, I was just stunned. Right after, fresh off losing a war to the Ayatollahs, Trump declares war on another religion. Blasphemous. It was blasphemous, that post that he put out there. And frankly, I think that this offends not only Catholics, but anybody, whether you have religious sensibilities, religious beliefs or not. And then, doubling down through J.D. Vance. Not just once Vance attacks the Pope, he doubles down then as well. And there have been a number of conservative Republican Catholics who have pushed back and said this is too much, too far. There's no justification for this. How you could possibly justify getting into a theological debate with the Pope is beyond me.
Talk about hubris, huh?
Yeah, talk about, J.D. Vance. And he was wrong on his
theology.
Right,
and it was wrong, exactly.
Well, yeah, let alone doing that. So, yeah, I just think this is just another, misstep. It adds to all the things you and I have been cataloging for months in terms of the campaign missteps. Completely unforced, unnecessary. I'm not Catholic, but I'm very proud of what the Pope, and frankly, a number of the Catholic leaders, our own Archbishop in the Detroit area, for example, but there were others, 3 who sat for an interview this past week and talked about, look, we're not being partisan here, but war is never a good thing. Never a good thing. There's always problems that result from war, and shouldn't be the first resort. And for Trump to try to turn that into some kind of partisan fight, I think just shows he's not thinking these things through, and he's just made the situation worse.
The meme that coincided, it's slightly different issue than the condemnation or the attacks that the Trump and the acolytes are lodging at the Pope, was this AI generated meme showing Trump as Christ healing people, and then this completely unbelievable. I didn't know what it was. So yeah, right.
Doctor.
Right. And anyway, it's hard to imagine, as I've watched for now going on 11 years, this cult-like fealty that American evangelicals writ large have, placing Trump above Christ in the pecking order, which many and most of them do. I mean, it fits into their perverted Christian nationalist white American Jesus, the New Testament was written here and, was written in Texas or, somewhere in some very red part of America, where Jesus likes to go shooting and drink beer. That's so much of the attitude, though. They're willing to look the other way on everything when it comes to religious doctrine and Donald Trump's antithesis to everything in the New Testament. Will a fraction, a small percentage, will 8% of evangelicals go, this is too much for me? Any votes that walk away from Trump and the Republicans they don't have to vote for. I'm not saying that evangelicals are going to suddenly completely switch their polarity and start supporting progressive or Democratic candidates. But if they don't show up to vote or they skip a race, they say, I'm not voting for Mike Rogers because I'm mad at Trump. A little here, a little there, and it makes a big difference. As we look at that U.S. Senate race that Rogers lost by 18,000 votes out of 5.5, nearly 6 million votes last time. It was a rounding error. This time, turnout's going to be less. We might get up close to 5 million. There seems to be a lot of enthusiasm and increased voter turnout in special elections and in the elections in New Jersey and Virginia last year. So I would expect that we could see the historic high turnout for Michigan's off-year election. I think that any voters who show up are, at this point, are motivated, seems to be to show their displeasure to Donald Trump and the Republicans. And this is really just shaping up to be a Democratic wave year, and one that Republicans, because of Trump and then their own cowardice, keep assisting with unforced errors.
Yeah, as long as it's said, politics, elections are about addition, right? Trump has never shown any interest since he was elected in addition, but he's gone the opposite direction. I mean, let's have foreign wars, which I promised not to get us into, and that has alienated a whole part of his base. But let's attack the Pope, which has alienated another part of his base. And you just go through issue after issue after issue. I'm going to deal with inflation. I'm going to boom the economy, which appealed to a lot of voters who felt and still feel economic stress. That hasn't happened. So he's been about the politics of subtraction. And we'll see how that plays out for him and the Republicans in the fall. He's really not done anything to expand his base beyond that and it was a minority of voters who did elect him president in 2024.
Let's wrap up here by when you look at what happened in Hungary this weekend, it was too big to rig. The size of the opposition's win over Orbán and his autocratic regime. They're now locked in rooms shredding documents to hide their crimes, and that's where we want Trump and MAGA. We know the breadth and depth of the crimes they were involved in the first term. Crimes, serious national security type of crimes, treasonous crimes, crime to overthrow the government and seize power after losing an election. The crimes that have been committed in this last year plus of Trump's second term, this is shaping up to be too big to rig, just like in Hungary. And there's still a lot of work that needs to be done over these next months, a lot of money to be raised, a lot of doors to be knocked. The Democrats have to do the work. Voters need to show up. And I think people have shown across the country in this last year that they are willing to show up, crawl across broken glass to say, don't do this to our country. We're not going to stand for it anymore. And we're going to see that in Michigan. We're going to see it starting on May 3rd with the special election in the Saginaw Bay City Midland Senate District. That every indication is that that's going to stay in Democratic hands. It's not even going to be close, despite Republicans spending massive sums. It's going to be a canary in a coal mine, and it's not going to portend very well for Republicans in Michigan this fall.
No, well put, Jeff. As you and I have chronicled, people don't need to listen to us to document it. It's been a very negative year. There's been a lot of things that have caused tremendous stress and worry about the shape of our democracy and whether we can keep a republic. But I gotta tell you, it was a huge shot in the arm for me this week when I heard about Orbán going down in Hungary. I think he even surprised a lot of Hungarians. People didn't want to believe the polls because he's been Trump's role model. He's done everything he can to subordinate the media, co-opt a business, right? Capture the government and make it as partisan as he could be. And despite all of that, he overwhelmingly lost. If I can figure out how to say, yes, we can in Hungarian, that's how I would end our podcast this week. I'm relieved to see that my short vacation didn't disrupt the quiet, calm, and always efficient work of our Orange Commander-in-Chief. At least it didn't get in the way of his golf game.
If the Republic is still standing, we return next week. As always, thank you for your attention to this matter.
A Republic, if you can keep it, is a presentation of Michigan citizens for a better tomorrow.